All right, good morning, good afternoon, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Alec, and I'll be here in the background to help answer any general or technical questions that you have throughout the session. But before we get started, I'll give you a little bit of information for today. You're going to receive a link to the recording of today's webinar and a follow-up email. Please allow at least 24 business hours before that information is sent. You will also be able to download a PDF of today's presentation in the same follow-up email. And your HRCI and SHRM certification codes will be sent as well in that same follow-up email. All right, so today we have a couple of great guests with us. We have Rebecca Harvey, the head of Business and Professional Career Solutions at Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, and we have Robert Robertson, Strategic Programs Manager at Hewlett-Packard Enterprise with us to speak with you all today. So I know you're going to enjoy today's presentation and the chance to interact with both of our speakers. So if you have any questions for them throughout the session, please feel free to submit those by clicking on the questions icon on the right-hand side of your screen, and we'll take those if we have some time at the end. But without any further delay, Rebecca, let's get started.
Great, thanks, Alec. Appreciate the time today. So at Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, we are no strangers to disruption. 2 years ago, we completed the largest, or what has been described as the largest company separation in history in the shortest amount of time. So I know that's a lot of disruption for one organization. And today's call, we're going to talk about how we've embraced disruption as a learning organization in particular at HPE. So there's no shortage of reasons why we need to pay attention to disruption. It's frankly all around us. I'm sure we can all give examples of how we've had to adapt to a new way of doing something because the old way is either no longer available or simply isn't as effective as we'd like it to be. Embracing that disruption is sometimes really simple. So who doesn't like to binge watch a TV show the entire season on Netflix or Hulu? Other disruptions, however, are more difficult to embrace. This is especially true in the learning industry. So for a lot of us, we've made a living on creating particular kinds of training solutions. We have ideas about how they should work, how they should run, what they should look like, what the learner experience should be. We're sometimes willing to try new things, but only if they fit within our mental picture of what a quality learning solution should look like. You know, just this morning I got an email from the CLO Accelerator program highlighting 3 critical things every learning leader needs to pay attention to in order to help their organization be more successful. The first item they listed was moving from conduit to curator. It's one of the things we're going to talk about today that we've done as we've changed our approach to learning. The second was the need for developing an effective learning strategy. And unlike what many of us would like to believe, saying we're going to do 70% of web-based training or 20% more web-based training, that's not really a strategy. So we're going to talk a little bit about how we've implemented our strategy. And then third was getting used to disruption. I would actually argue at this point that we're no longer in a place where we can get used to disruption. We have to embrace it, and in some ways we actually have to be the ones causing the disruption. So those are some of the things we're going to talk about today. So the first thing we're going to talk about is game changers, and we'd really like to get your perspective on what you're seeing as game changers in the learning industry in particular. The second thing we'll talk about is the shift that we've made within our organization, really from being a kind of point training solution provider to being a strategic partner with the business, driving organizational capability. Then we're going to let you drive for a little bit and let you decide which topic you'd like us to cover in more depth. This is where we get into the really tactical kind of details of our strategy and our plan and how we've implemented it at HPE. And then lastly, we'll go through our lessons learned, and hopefully you can learn from our experiences and, yes, our mistakes as you look to the future of your own learning organization. So first of all, let's talk a little bit about game changers. So we talked already about how some disruptions are good and they're easy to adapt to, and some disruptions are not as easy to adapt to. Digital disruption, as we all know, is the change that occurs when new digital technologies and business models affect the value proposition of existing goods and services. So it's a kind of a chicken and egg thing in terms of whether or not a digital disruption drives consumer behavior or if consumer behavior drives the need for disruption. Certainly things like Netflix and Airbnb and Uber are all examples of disruptions that have absolutely influenced their industries. I was in San Diego last week and went to the rideshare line. And in the rideshare line, I've done my Lyft app and I'm waiting for my ride. And there was an elderly couple standing next to me who had never used Uber before. You could tell that they were in the right place, but they didn't really have an idea of what the experience was going to be for them. And so, I stopped and took about 5 minutes to help them walk through their app on their phone, figure out, oh yes, it's a white Toyota Prius that's going to be coming for you. Your driver's name is Mitch. It's an interesting and different experience for all of us as we figure out how we're going to embrace digital disruption. One of the things that I'm really interested in learning about is from you all and your perspective. What are the game changers that you're experiencing? What are the things that feel a little bit like they've come out of nowhere and have caught you off guard? So we have a brief poll. Alec, do you want to pull that up? So I'd love to get your take on what are some of the biggest disruptors for the learning function. Give you just a few minutes to think through those.
All right, yeah, please select your option here and then just click submit. We're seeing some results flowing through now, Rebecca, so we'll give it a few more seconds and then we'll show the results.
Awesome. Wow. Coming up in thirds, that's great. Social media online knowledge sharing at 33%, MOOCs at 33%, and knowledge attainment apps at 33%. Interestingly enough, learner expectations is at 0. And that's one of the things that within our organization we really identified as a key disruptor for us. Things that were absolutely changing how we approach learning within our organization and how we needed to change learning in our organization. We also saw changing business requirements as a key driver for us. And so that's where we're going to spend a bit more time today talking about those learner expectations and changing business requirements. Alec, it looks like I don't have permission to change the slide now. There we go. All right.
You should have control now, Rebecca.
Yeah, I'm clicking. We'll give that just a minute. Doesn't seem to be responding. Technical difficulties. There we go. So consumerization is one of the big trends that we're seeing and how learners expect to see information. We're seeing a significant shift in how our learners want and expect to find, learn, and apply information, which in many ways is a byproduct of all of the disruption. From our stakeholders, we're seeing an explosion in demand for different kinds of learning solutions. At first, the request was just for mobile. Can you make this more accessible? Can you put it on tablets? Can you put it on phones for our employees? And now, though, it goes well beyond mobile. We find ourselves working across the entire HR ecosystem on really holistic talent management solutions, looking for integrated performance support solutions, so making sure that that real-time, just-in-time training is available to employees. So as we've bridged the gap between our learning and talent organizations, we've begun to see a lot of new opportunities across the business value chain to really drive organizational capability. If you're familiar with Burson's learning organization maturity model, you might recognize the shift in thinking from tactical training provider to strategic business partner. The Burson model is a great depiction of that shift that we're seeing in our own organization, and many, maybe like yours, have made over the past several years, from that tactical training solution provider to more of a strategic partner. So the challenge for us was really figuring out the right way to make the transition from really those individual point-specific training solutions to the larger organizational strategy and requirements. We, like all of you probably, are facing challenges to be faster, more nimble. We have to be less focused on the academics of learning and more focused on the practical application of it. We need to be more business-minded, learner-centric in our approaches, integrating learning into how and where people really work. So the thing that strikes me is that evolution doesn't stop. What got us to this point will not really take us any further. So we, as an organization, sat down and said, where are we today and where do we need to go tomorrow? And we really designed a pretty straightforward view of the future picture. So moving from one-size-fits-all training and formal classes, desktop, laptop access only, text-based as the primary source, L&D developed and curated content, and then training available when it's scheduled versus on demand, and then multiple learning solutions, to an environment where there really is personalized access to learning, where there's formal and informal micro lessons, modules, and courses available to a learner at any time, at any place. That mobile-first access to online learning so that they can access it anytime, anywhere. Video-based as the primary source versus text-based. L&D and learner-curated content. We have so many subject matter experts and individuals within our organization who really are unparalleled in their industries, and we need to leverage that and make sure that those employees have an opportunity, even more so than they do just in their small work groups, to impact change across the broader organization. We need training available when it's needed, and we need to have integrated learning systems. So these are the from and to things that we decided we needed to focus on as a learning organization. So the next poll that we have for you really is to put you in the driver's seat of this, this presentation. We can talk a little bit about either our platform selection, or we can talk about our pilot setup and structure, because one of the things that we determined as we went through this was that we needed to really have a tool that would enable a lot of those things that you saw in that to and from list, a way of doing things differently than what we had previously done. So Alec, if you want to pull up the next poll, we'll let the group decide here what topic they'd like us to dig into.
All right, we're getting the results flying in here, so we'll give it another couple seconds, and then we will close that poll down. All right, Rebecca, we're going to check out the results here. All right.
Well, the good news for all of you is that we're going to cover lessons learned for sure. And then Robert, if you want to jump to the pilot setup and structure section, I'll let you take over.
Great. Hello, everybody. Just wait for the slides to come back up, and we'll talk about our pilot effort in a bit more detail. So I'm going to have to shield your eyes. I'm going to be jumping through a couple slides here. Avert your gaze away from the screen. This, by the way, I mean, all of this content with notes and such available for download as a handout. So you will have access to all of this information. Okay, here we go. So I'll talk about the pilot process. First, let me just describe a little bit. There were four principal goals of our pilot effort. The first was that we wanted to gauge and evaluate the efficacy of the learning experience platform that we had selected to move forward with. Second, we wanted to identify best practices associated with what we were referring to as the new style of learning at HPE. Thirdly, We wanted to validate our own assumptions regarding the preferences and work styles of our learner population. And then lastly, we wanted to get a good feel for what resources are going to be required to manage this. You know, we knew the world was changing around us, but we wanted a really good feel. So, well, what exactly do we need to have? How long does it take to curate a video channel, for example? Things like that. We wanted to gain as much practical knowledge about this as we could. So that's what we set out to accomplish when we started this pilot journey. The pilot itself consists of 5 different components. So I'm going to discuss each of these in turn. So there was a process of audience selection. We defined a communication strategy. We defined success metrics and surveys and how we would go about evaluating success. We had to build our own support infrastructure to guide us through our pilot effort. And then lastly, we spent a lot of time designing the first user experience, thinking being, this is going to be the introduction to this new style of learning. We wanted to make sure that we put the most, positive face on it that we could. So again, I will be discussing each of these in turn. So I'll start with a discussion of our pilot audiences. You can see the audiences are listed here. We actually are in the middle of our pilots now. So actually we're approaching the end of the pilot period, but technically most of these are still ongoing. We tried to capture, actually we did capture about 1,000 learners within our organization. We wanted to cover as broad an area as we could. So we were looking for different groups, different age groups, different job roles, different geographies. We wanted as diverse a sampling as we could gather to, again, achieve those 4 objectives I had just cited. Within this overall 1,000-person pilot, so actually there were 4 efforts running in parallel. The first group, the largest, was a pilot dedicated to our leader population. And we were defining leaders in this case as managers of individual contributors. So not managers of managers, not VPs, not executives, but line managers, as we would refer to them. We included 550 people that fit that category. The second group of the pilot was members of our young employee network. Again, generally tended to be younger, new to the workforce. We included 250 representatives of that organization in our effort. Thirdly, the Learning Lab is our own learning organization. It's it encompasses the group that both Rebecca and I belong to. We're 65 members strong. So we included our entire group there. These include leaders, instructional designers, facilitators, people associated with the learning function. Lastly, we included 50 members of a data security group. This is a relatively small group, but we thought it was indicative of many of the groups within our technical audience. So then there's also, so it doesn't quite add up to 1,000. There were some other folks from other organizations, smaller numbers, that were also included in the effort. But the sum total came to about 1,000. Now, for each of these groups, we worked with the leaders of each organization, so the leaders of that management group I referred to, leaders with the Young Employee Network. And we wanted to make sure that they supported the effort. In many cases, they helped us identify folks that would be good candidates for participation in the pilot. And then we got their support, with an eye, once the pilot is through, we're going to be looking to implement this throughout our enterprise. And we wanted to make sure that they would also be willing to serve as champions as we decide to take this forward. So that's what we started. Again, this work is still ongoing, but as it stands, we're working with about 1,000 people in the organization. So the next aspect of our strategy involves our communication plan. There were 4 components to this, actually 4.5. We started with a welcome message. So every participant within these pilot groups that I just identified received a message, an email, announcing the program, the intent, trying to get them excited, explaining what types of things to expect and why we were doing this, giving them some direction if they had questions, where they can go to find answers. Immediately following that, wasn't really part of our communication plan, but I think it is worth mentioning. We sent out a short survey We wanted to find out from the audiences that were going to participate, what is their current perception of our learning organization and the resources that we provide to them? And we're trying to quantify this perception as much as possible for input later in our metrics work, or when we're trying to define our success criteria. So we sent that survey out, again, measure their current perception of the learning organization, and perhaps this is most important, we wanted to get a sense of what their interests were. So we basically created a top 10 list for each of these principal pilot audiences, asking them, what topics are of most interest to you, knowing that we would build the platform around the things that they had just told us were important. So again, hoping to reflect back to them that we understand what their interests are, and our organization is committed to delivering and helping them resolve whatever needs they had in those areas. So we sent out the welcome message, we sent out this kind of pre-survey, and we sent out a getting started email. So this was their official introduction to the program. It contained login information. It restated some of the messaging from the welcome message, but this was really the trigger. When they got this message, they were asked to click into the system. Their accounts would be activated. As far as we were concerned, that was day one of the pilot. That's when our metrics started kicking in. We started tracking usage and all that kind of good stuff. If they didn't respond, so a lot of folks, they got the message and, for whatever reason, didn't activate their account, we sent a reminder out. 5 days later, so we sent another notice saying, hey, we really want your support here. Jump on in, the water's fine. And then, not mentioned here, we didn't have to do this very often, but if required, we sent a third and final reminder a few days after that. So that was the third component. The fourth component, we're going to talk about this in a bit more detail when we talk about the first user experience. But when they came into the platform, when they logged on for the first time, we wanted to make sure that there was something waiting for them, something specific for them to do. We didn't just want to invite people into the platform and say, hey, click around and have fun. We were somewhat directive in this respect. We gave them a specific task to complete, but we were, again, tried to be smart about this. We gave them something that we thought would reflect the preferences that they told us they had, something that was easy, something that would make them, we don't want to frustrate them from the get-go. So the task might be follow somebody or watch this. And we also use it as an opportunity to make them aware of resources that they may not have known were available to them. So for example, we had some partnerships with external libraries of posted content, like for example, things from Lynda. A lot of folks didn't realize that we had, or they had, this type of access. So the initial assignment might have reflected that. So bring them into the system, give them something to do, and then maybe open their eyes to something beneficial that they'll make their experience with our learning organization more positive. So once the communication plan was implemented, again, this was all happening in parallel. Obviously, the design of this, we didn't follow a linear path. We worked on all of these things, simultaneously as we designed our pilot approach. But we did know, very early on, we wanted to define our success metrics. We wanted to be real clear on how we would measure success for this effort. So I did mention, before the folks were welcome into the program, or before they activated their accounts, we sent everyone that participant survey. Again, we wanted to identify their specific interests in learning. What could we do for them, and how could we reflect those preferences back to them in the duration of the pilot, as well as quantifying their attitudes towards our learning organization. Halfway through the pilot, we sent out a pulse survey, just kind of a check-in. How are we doing? What types of things, could we do to make this experience better? Because there was time. This was at the midpoint. We still had a few weeks to address things that came up here. So, in one case, a specific example, we received a lot of questions about mobile access, and one of the critical goals for this effort was to make sure that everything that we offered here would be available on a mobile platform. So the fact that we got some questions about, like, how exactly do we use this mobile bit? You know, we've been doing it on the desktop. That was an opportunity for us to re-emphasize that aspect of the program and re-communicate the steps for downloading the mobile apps and the different things we had to support. At conclusion, again, we're just homing in on this now. It's actually towards the end of this month, we'll be wrapping up the pilot, but we'll send a follow-up survey. We're actually doing this to two different audiences. We'll be sending a follow-up survey questions to all of the folks that participated in the pilot, as well as a control group that we've created for each pilot audience. So we'll be able, and the control group did not participate in the learning platform. They weren't part of any of the work I just described, but they maintain the same job titles. They're in the same roles as the folks that did. So we've got a couple of different things we'll be able to measure. For the folks in the pilot, we can do the before and after survey results and see if there's any change there. But we'll also, at the end of the pilot, be able to compare people who participated in this experience to those that were part of our control group and were not part of the experience. So again, that was the strategy that we adopted pilot-wise, or I'm sorry, in terms of the support metrics. Because this was a pilot, because this was something, you know, we were, as Rebecca said, you know, in this sense, we were the catalyst for some of this change. We didn't have support of all of the organizations within our company that, you know, we would expect to have if we were fully implementing the program. So in terms of the pilot, we had to provide our own support infrastructure. We did this in a number of ways. We created a resource page in SharePoint. Largely self-service, so we put links to frequently asked questions, steps on how to get started. There were some links to videos and things that would show people how to do or complete some basic tasks. And then, as you can see here, links to download the mobile application. So, you know, if they needed some assistance with that or direction, they could do that here. We also created groups. So we use Yammer internally. We created some groups within Yammer that we created a group for everybody that was participating in the pilot, and then we created a second group for curators and people that had more of a leadership role within this effort. And the idea, and this actually was borne out, there was very little direct intervention from our learning development team. Most of the questions people had were either resolved from this resource page, or people posted their questions in Yammer and other people responded and took care of them quickly. So it was actually, you know, wasn't very taxing on our organization, which worked out well. And then lastly, the first user experience. I said we spent a lot of time making sure, doing everything we could to make sure that the user's introduction to the system was as positive as it could be. And obviously, you know, there was a fear if the first experience wasn't positive, you know, we've lost a great opportunity. And it may be hard, it would certainly be harder to get these people to come back and try again. We didn't want to do that. We wanted people to come in and be dazzled and blown away and, you know, not, you know, hardly able to contain themselves, you know, to come in and enjoy what we've created a second time. So what did we do? Couple things listed here. First, we made sure when they came in that there was an assignment or something to do waiting for them. You know, as I mentioned, we didn't want to just say, here's the platform, log in and see what we've got. We were a bit directive. We actually, you know, when they came in for the first time, there was work waiting for them. Now, each pilot handled this a little bit differently, but there'd be things like, you know, follow a user, or identify a person within your own work group that you'd like to follow and, you know, begin sharing information with, or, you know, find a video or find a piece of training content that you think might be interesting. And you can see there's a screen cap of the one of the applications that we used. See, there's this idea, this learning queue. So as they came in, they could see, you know, there'll be different things in there waiting for them. We also assign them to a relevant channel. So a channel, just within this platform, a channel is a logical grouping of content. So we created a channel dedicated to the folks that were interested in leadership or part of that leadership pilot. We created a channel for the Young Employee Network, and so on and so forth. We also created different channels that we thought might be interested to some of the pilot participants. So for example, we created a channel dedicated to coaching and facilitation, which was of interest to some of the members of our own team. We created a channel on mindfulness and well-being, which we thought might be of interest to anyone that was participating. So they came in just to make it easy for them. We assigned them automatically to the channel that was best aligned to their pilot, but then, made it clear that, if their interests may take them elsewhere, by all means they can subscribe or sign up for any of the other channels that were available to them. We made sure that all of their peers were loaded at once. So when they came in, that their friends, their workmates, people that they would recognize by name, that they were on there with them as well. So it was very easy to see other activity and other people who were posting, so they could begin engaging with their workmates right from the start. We also, and this is maybe the most important, we spent a lot of time making sure that the platform was pre-populated with relevant content. So it's like if you could imagine a grand opening of a supermarket, if you came in there and all the shelves were empty, that's not a great experience. You probably wouldn't go back. Even if, the store owner said, hey, we didn't put anything here because, we wanted to hear from you and find out what you wanted. And then, guarantee next time you come in, you're going to see your stuff there. That's not the approach we took. We made sure that everything was as fully populated with content that was aligned to what they told us they wanted in their preference surveys. We made sure that that stuff was available to them. And in fact, as I mentioned, when we made some initial assignments, we directed people to the things, where we directed the pilot participants to the things that we thought would really ring a bell with them. So we spent a lot of time curating content within our own content libraries. We looked through the content of libraries of organizations that we partnered with, like Linda and Safari. We found lots of great content. We highlighted it, and as the folks came in, it was very easy, very visible, to direct them to the stuff and say, hopefully, and then reflect back at them, say, this is what you said you wanted. Tell us if that's the case. And so, as we did our midpoint surveys and so forth, we validated whether, in fact, we did hit the mark there. And again, as we go through tracking where people were going, we also use that information to make sure that the content that we had selected was what it needed to be. So again, that's kind of an overview of our pilot strategy. Again, the pilot is ongoing so far. The results have been very favorable. So we're excited to bring this to a conclusion. We expect this to wrap for us near the end of this month. And then we would change gears and to move on to a full implementation within our organization. So now I'd like to turn the conversation back to Rebecca so she can begin the discussion of some of the lessons we've learned from our efforts so far. So Rebecca.
Great, thank you, Robert. So as we think about lessons learned, it's important to reflect, I think, on the strategy that we put in place. It wasn't just, let's find a platform and launch it. It was really focused on how do we create an environment where employees have access to real impact, real-time relevant knowledge for them. How do we create exposure and experiences through dialogue, through coaching, through mentoring, stretch goals, rotations, networking, all the kinds of things that you think of that sit within maybe the talent organization's purview, but where learning really has a key role. So that blending of talent and learning as an organization was incredibly critical to this effort. So that we've spent some time talking about the tactical platform and our pilot process, it's important to understand that strategy behind it, that environment that we wanted, the exposures and the experience that we wanted, and then lastly, of course, the formal education elements, which in a traditional 70-20-10 model kind of make up that 10%. But we've really taken a different approach to even that from an education perspective. So thinking about what we can do as micro lessons or micro learning, those short bursts of training that are essential for both readiness and reinforcement of training content, but even and also as standalone elements or topics. How we take apart our training materials so that we can create sort of those Lego building blocks, if you will, of modularized content that can easily be reimagined in different ways. So instead of a manager in the business coming to us and saying, hey, I want a 2-day class on X, Y, or Z for my employees, more often than not, we get managers saying, I don't have time for a 2-day class. Can you come to my staff meeting and spend 20 minutes on X, Y, or Z topic? And so how do we take apart our training materials so that we can really modularize them in a way that makes it easy for us to customize those kinds of real-time solutions for our employees and for our business? It was one of those things that, Alvin Toffler, who's the futurist, once wrote, the illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. And if you think about our job as human capital management professionals, our job really is to build those opportunities and experiences that expedite that learning, unlearning, relearning process. And it's one of the things that we really identified as part of our lessons learned. So we've categorized the lessons learned into 3 main areas. The first being people, the second process, and the third systems. It doesn't mean we didn't have lessons learned outside of these, but it was just a way that we could sort of categorize what we've learned. So the first lesson we learned was really from a people perspective. There's a tremendous shift in culture required to make this change successful. And to some extent, our organization was there before we were. We had those managers asking us for mobile-ready content. We had learners saying, gosh, my experience outside of work learning is better than my experience inside of work learning. And so for us, the culture shift wasn't as big of a leap as you might expect. The overriding goal really is to meet the needs of the modern learner. And there's been a lot of research out there about generational expectations and how the generations are different in what they expect. But really within our organization, we saw this sort of demand coming from all geographies and from all generations of workers who have a different experience outside of work than they have inside of work, and wanting to see that come to fruition within their own organization. So the good news for us is that we really had to understand our audience. Robert talked a little bit about making sure those channels were pre-populated. One of the struggles, I guess, for our own team was getting them past that hurdle of saying, well, I'm not a subject matter expert. How do I know what's going to be useful or meaningful to someone else? And to a large extent, it is about taking your best guess. You know the audience, you do your audience analysis, you understand what their work looks like and what their needs are, and then you take the best guess, and you start to see through the platform itself what's resonating and what's not, and you learn from that and you continually evolve that. So the first thing you have to know really is your audience. What is going to be meaningful and relevant for them? Second thing you need to know is your content. What's out there? What's available? What are the resources? We just went through a really interesting design sprint for a channel to stand up a channel in just a couple of days' time. For a recently acquired company. And so really looking at how do you research Twitter, how do you research Facebook, what can you pull from LinkedIn, what can you pull from company websites, what's available on YouTube, looking at all the available resources out there and understanding what tools and content is really available versus what content you have to create. So if you think about the learning organization of the future, I almost wonder if the learning organization of the future doesn't own any content. If the learning organization of the future is a curator of content and finds the best, most relevant information, and then they put that wrapper around it for the employee. So they build that experience for the employee where they help connect the dots, but the bulk of the content is available from someplace else. I mean, let's face it, information is ubiquitous. And we have an obligation to help employees find the best, most useful information. The last lesson we learned really was about knowing ourselves as learning professionals. So we kind of had some hurdles to overcome, and it was one of the most difficult challenges within our own team, and that was how to develop that curative mindset, how to get past this notion of I have to teach somebody this step and then this step and then this step in a linear fashion, or they won't understand the end objective. Recognizing that all learning is and always has been self-directed, meaning if I have employees who come to a 5-day training class, I may have objectives for them. I may have specific things that I want them to be accountable for doing when they leave. But what they actually take and apply to the job is on them. That's what they choose. That's what the self-directed element is. So getting learning professionals to kind of step outside of that traditional sort of mindset that says, I have to create this step and this step and this step, is really important, and a difficult conversation we've been having with our teams throughout this pilot process, because it's such a significant paradigm shift for a lot of them. One of the things that has helped us as we've begun this journey is really thinking about the research from Burson around the fully stacked learning professional. So understanding all the nuances and intricacies of the future of learning is really important for our teams. So if we think about the people impacts of this, as Robert mentioned, we are in the middle of our pilot. We're just coming to the end of it. And one of the things that's just a little bit misleading about this slide I'll share with you is that we removed compliance from our LMS target. So our LMS target is obviously 100% for compliance training, and we're at that as an organization. But if you remove the compliance and legally required training, the target for us is about 20%. We would love to see 20% utilization of just people going in of their own free will to find the best content and information and courses available to them. Right now, for first quarter, we're sitting at about 9.5% for utilization on the LMS. In contrast, the new platform that we've implemented that includes the curative content, the social learning, those pilot participants, our target for participation is 56%, and we're sitting right at 50%. So there are a lot of things that you could look at and find reasons why these numbers might look the way they look, but at least on the surface, this is a promising trend, that we're providing something in a way that is more accessible and meaningful and useful to employees than what we've historically provided. You'll also see in this sort of unsolicited feedback from one of our pilot participants, we're looking at the anecdotal feedback as well. We're definitely seeing some both leading and lagging indicators within our organization that we're moving in the right direction with this. So Robert, I will turn it back to you to talk a little bit more about process and the lessons learned there.
Yep, thank you. So when we talk about process, this is the second category of lessons learned for us. What I'd like to talk about here is really three aspects of this process. And this, by the way, this is the process that we would use, process for ensuring that the quality of our offerings is as high as it can possibly be. And so to ensure that, basically three things, or three ways, or three things that we do to ensure that. The first is that our offerings are as simple as they could possibly be. This relates to content as well as the platform we're using to offer up this content to learners. The content itself is short, it's focused, we love video, we love things that are just a couple of minutes long. We knew in terms of the platform we didn't have the time or the resources to initiate a large-scale training program. If we knew that to get people to engage with the system we were deploying, we would have to train them on how to use it. That would never work. So one of our bellwethers that we would use is that whatever platform we introduce, it has to be as simple and intuitive and fun and engaging that we could just put people there, and they will start using it without realizing that they're actually learning something new. It would feel familiar to them, and they'd have a great experience. I think one of the analogs that we've seen is that the platform that we adopted is very much like Facebook. And so a lot of the folks within our pilot audience were familiar with Facebook, the idea of sharing posts and that kind of thing. The way the learning would be represented to them is kind of a feed that runs on by. That made sense to them. It met our simplicity requirements, and I think that's one aspect of our success. The second is scalability. We wanted, obviously, we're working and we're drawing a lot of conclusions from a small pilot audience. We expect this to scale, by almost a factor of 100 shortly. We wanted to make sure that whatever we did, or small things that happen, that they are going to work in a big way. Things that work in one audience can be applied to other audiences. The same learning experience that may work for a sales audience, in general terms, the content might be different, but the overall learning experience will work just as well for technical professionals or HR professionals or folks in executive positions. Again, we wanted to make sure that we had the diversity and the flexibility that we would need to take us forward. And then lastly, this may be the most interesting one, we wanted to make sure that it's similar to scalable, I guess. We wanted to make sure that what we were building was repeatable. So if you can imagine an idea, a small idea that might pop up in one corner of the company. Maybe it's an article that somebody found, or it's a some type of resource that someone uncovered that really makes a difference. We wanted to make sure that the process, the approach to learning that we were implementing, that can be repeated. That whatever that one person found, that the platform that we designed would allow for the viral spread of this information throughout the organization. So a small win in one area could spread and would result in multiple wins throughout the entire enterprise. Now, I think this actually talks to one of the points that Rebecca had made about the balance between your formal curriculum and maybe the reliance on curative learning and new styles of approaching our job function. We see here is basically a 2-year span of data. Now this reflects the amount of, not the total amount of content or deliverable. These are things that were tagged as being formal learning experiences within our learning management system. And again, we just picked 2 portfolios, but frankly, the same relationships exist in any portfolio that we might have selected. In the program project management space, 2 years ago, there were 162 pieces of curriculum. In Q1 of this year, that dropped to 47. And frankly, if we were to run the number now, we're currently nearing the end of our second fiscal quarter, that number, I believe, has dropped down to 13. In the business and professional skills side, there were 54 pieces of curriculum. That's now dropped down to 16. So again, dramatic drops in curriculum. This has been balanced by curated content, found content, references to videos, different things, more maybe non-traditional forms of learning, things that we weren't really able to integrate into our learning ecosystem before, but now we can, because we have tools that will allow us to do this. The last point, the last category of lessons learned involves systems, and particularly integration. One of the things that we strove for, we didn't want people to look at the things in terms of either or. If I'm going to do these new things, I have to give other things up. That wasn't the approach. The idea was to integrate. If something was good, rather than abandoning it and moving to something else, is, well, how could we do that and these new things that we wanted to do? How could we merge multiple external content libraries together? So Lynda, Get Abstract, all these different things that we were using. How can we merge them together so it appeared as one giant library to our users? And then on top of that, how can we marry our own internal resources to that? So, things that formal learning that existed within our learning management system, things that existed on our SharePoints, for example. How could we integrate that into the overall learner experience? And then step further, how could we integrate our own productivity systems, our CRM systems, our email systems, a variety of different resources that were currently available, our existing social media network. How could we bring this all together? So one of the key, I think, criteria, one of the things that were probably the biggest wins in terms of the approach that we've taken is that we now have the ability to tie all this together, so a user can just go into a text field on the platform page, search for something, and pull content from each of these places. That's fantastic, and it's not mentioned here. They could do this from their phone. They have this experience when they need it. So whatever resources are available, they can get at with their mobile, regardless of where they happen to be. The last point in terms of this is, even all of those above 3 points are still, as far as we're concerned, those are internal to HPE. Now we know a lot of people, some of their best ideas are posted to external networks. People may post, articles to LinkedIn or infographics to places like Pinterest, and, stuff like that. We wanted to capture that as well. And again, some of our richest offerings, just integrating things like our Facebook. We wanted to make sure that was part of the learning experience that we provide our folks as well. So again, you've kind of got these merging of content libraries and productivity systems, but then on top of that, there's kind of a larger narrative where we're going to merge all of that stuff with that belongs to our private learning ecosystem, and then marry that to information that is publicly available that our own employees are sharing. So last, maybe this is our closing slide in terms of the systems lessons learned. In the past 10 years ago, maybe even a little more recent than that, we looked to our LMS as the repository of record, and everything was about tracking compliance and very prescriptive approaches to learning, where the learning organization was that you need to do this, you need to do that, and we'll make sure that you do it, and if you don't, you're going to get a nasty. That's not the approach we're taking now. It's not about prescribing things and telling people to do stuff. It's about inspiring them and making them want to do stuff, and then once they've got that mentality, getting out of their way, giving them stuff that they can go and access, and giving them a better experience than they would find if they Googled something. Providing resources. If they Google, they're not going to be able to access these external libraries that we've paid for, that we've given. They're not going to be able to access proprietary information. They're not going to be able to access, the expertise of the SMEs within the company. So it's just a matter of not equating the Google experience. Our goal is to exceed it. The future state here much more reliant on user-generated and shared content, blends of formal and informal learning experiences, coaching, mentoring, job aids, wrapping that all together and give them an experience that's not on par with what they can find outside of the company, but is better than what they can find outside of the company. So I'm going to turn it over, our last slide, to Rebecca for some closing thoughts. Rebecca?
Yeah, absolutely. So if we reflect back on the disruptors that you all identified today at the beginning, the social learning, the MOOCs, which we really equate to that externally available content, and then lastly, the knowledge acquisition apps. Those are all things that are embedded in the platform that we selected and in our new approach to learning at HPE. One of our favorite Meg Whitman quotes is, "The future belongs to the fast." In a disruptive world faced with ever-changing technology, change and disruption are unavoidable. So rather than fighting it, you just got to learn to embrace it. It provides opportunities to really shake up the status quo. Disruption is a call to action, and we hope you'll take some of the lessons we've learned back to your own organizations. So thank you for your time today. We'll open it up for questions. Just one last thing, for those of you who wanted to dig deeper into the platform selection, I just remind you that the slides and notes are available, and I think our contact information is on the next slide, and feel free to reach out to Robert or myself, either one, to get more information on that if you feel like your vote was slighted. So we'll open it up for questions now. Alec, have you, are there any in the
Yep, I have some here in the queue, and we have a couple in already. And if you have a question for the speakers today, just click on the question icon on the right-hand side of your screen, type in your question, and click submit. We're going to get started with one, and I apologize if I mispronounce your name, Liviu. The question is the word curriculum still valid, or should learning objectives be set by the learners themselves? Is it different from technical jobs versus office jobs?
That's an interesting question, and I think you'll get a different answer from any learning professional that you ask. For me, learning curriculum is still valid, but it is limited, and it's limited by the specific job function and tasks that an individual is expected to do. So I'll give you an example. In our technical learning space, we have engineers who have deep technical learning needs. Deep technical learning needs. Right? These guys start talking and I have no clue what they're talking about. But they are really inventing the solutions that our customers are maybe don't even know that they need. And so curriculum for a technical employee might look and feel very different than it did previously. Might be something that's very customer oriented, very tactical, where we give them a real customer problem and they have to go in and play with the equipment hands-on and come up with the best solution, or come up with 3 solutions as an example. So I think that our approach to curriculum has changed. It is less prescriptive, but it's still there.
Okay, we're going to move along to the next one, and this one comes from Gene. Gene's question is, which external content have you found to be the most beneficial?
Robert, you want to talk to that in terms of the curation process that people have followed?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's hard to answer. I mean, there's certainly, like mentioned, there are different vendor partners that we're working with who host external content libraries. We found that, or we found those resources to be very useful. You know, it's very professional, very well done. Yeah, in terms of that's probably where I would say, you know, the user selected or the self-curated type of information, it's so diverse, it's hard to, and maybe that's the answer, you know, it's so diverse and it's hard to put your finger on any one area or one theme that's rising to the top. If anything, you know, the story there is how diverse a collection of information is getting put into the system, and it's actually, you know, that may be the benefit. You know, diversity breeds innovation. People are being exposed to topics. You know, there may be things then posted in a channel dedicated to innovation that, you know, on the face of it, you wouldn't even think had anything to do with innovation, but that person who shared it did. And, you know, if they did a good job in their posting, they'll take a moment to explain why they think this is relevant. And, you know, suddenly you're seeing something that you know, or you're looking at something in a way that you hadn't before. So, you know, I guess, again, to sum the answer, I think, you know, the external providers are key. You know, I think, you know, not letting this just be a matter of users posting content. That was one of our lessons learned. It's really, you need to blend the external, you know, more professional content with what the users are providing. But look to the users to really, you know, take all that and, you know, kind of put it in a completely different spin on things. And you know, that's really where, you know, that's where you go from you know, B level to A+ level, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, thank you both for that. I think we're going to have time for one more, and this last one here is going to come from Amy. The question is, once the pilot phase ends, what is the plan to allow the content curators to place the content in the platform?
Yeah, so I can talk to that a little bit, and feel free to chime in, Robert. So it's one of the things we've talked about. Just because the pilot ends, we don't want the learner experience to end. And so I think there's definitely an expectation that the individuals who have been curating the channels will continue to do so. It'll just be in a little bit less structured manner than it has been as part of the pilot.
Yeah, I think even one of the things we talked about was scalability. So what we're doing now, I mean, you know, knock on wood, but we think, you know, it's literally, we'll flip a switch and the structure that we've built now will just grow. You know, it's not everything that's there now, all of the content, you know, a lot of the the curators that are in place, that will just continue as it was. And I don't even think it'll be that much more work for the folks that are currently engaged with the pilot. It'll just, if you're singing to an audience of 1,000 people or an audience of 100,000, you on stage singing, you don't have to sing any louder. That's the kind of that's the mentality we're going to take here. So, I think it's going to be a very smooth, easy, non-disruptive transition.
All right. Well, Robert and Rebecca, thank you so much for presenting today. You were both fantastic guests, and I thought there was a lot of great information shared. Thank you to all of our attendees in the audience today. We had a lot of participation there in the Q&A. We had some questions roll through that we were not able to get to, but we do appreciate your participation. For those of you who've asked, you can find materials from today's webinar and all other CLO webinars archived at events.clomedia.com, or you can find it at our webinar page with the /webinars there at the end. You will be directed directly to a post-event survey after this webinar ends, so if you could, we would really appreciate it if you filled that out. Your feedback is always very important to us. I also want to thank today's sponsors at Cornerstone OnDemand, and thank you once more to our attendees, Robert, Rebecca. We'll see you everybody back here for our next CLO webinar, which will take place on April 11th, and that's titled Ready for Tomorrow, Harnessing the Power of Digital for Workforce Transformation. All right, have a great day, everybody.